From Microsoft. We've got Planet Technologies here today to help to present, leveraging Microsoft Endpoint Manager to manage a distributed workforce. Very popular topic these days as a result of the pandemic and our SLG customers needing to manage both, endpoints and users on both on and off the network. With that being said, I'll hand it over to Bob.
Thanks, Tony. I'm not going to take long because I know you're here to see the main show, which is Shane and our incredible tech subject matter experts on this topic. My name is Bob Ballard. I'm the Director of Cloud Strategy and Sales here at Planet Technologies. And before we get started, I just wanted to lay out one thing. So not only do we have subject matter expertise on these technical topics for this and many other things that we're going to get into, and I'm super excited for Shane to talk to you today. But I wanted to say we're also experts in Microsoft funding, to the point where Microsoft often brings us in to talk to their own sales staff about Microsoft funding opportunities that are available. So as you go through and look at these technologies and understand where they fit with you, we're happy to work with you and your Microsoft account team to understand if there is a funding program, and there are many that very well may qualify on some of these topics that we're talking about today. If there is a funding program and there's a way to execute it, we are also the experts in that, and we will work with the Microsoft account team. No promises, of course. I can't promise money that's not mine, as you guys know. But if there is a funding program and we can make we can come up with a way that you guys qualify for that funding program, we are also experts in those. So feel free to reach out to us or your Microsoft account team, and we'll work together with them to try to find the right funding program so that we can help you execute some of this great technology we're going to share with you today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the real reason why you're here. Shane, why don't you take it away?
Sure. Thank you, Bob and Tony. So my name is Shane Curtis. I'm an endpoint architect with Planet Technologies. So I work with a lot of these products on a daily basis, these products and solutions. Thank you for giving me some of your time today to learn more about this valuable subject. This is a frequent conversation we have with many organizations. So it was kind of good because I didn't have to learn anything new, just reorganize my thoughts to share them with you. If you have any questions while I'm talking, feel free to put them in the chat window, and I'm going to save some time for Q&A at the end. So we'll take all the questions, and you could submit verbally any questions at that point that you have. So, all right, so let's get started on our topic for today, which is leveraging Microsoft Endpoint Manager to manage a distributed workforce. Specifically, this has a focus on how to leverage co-management, specifically between Intune and Configuration Manager to better leverage a distributed environment. So for the agenda, I want to talk first about, just briefly talk about what Configuration Manager and Intune are, and then we'll tie them together into Microsoft Endpoint Manager and how they come under a single management umbrella with the Microsoft Endpoint Manager tool, the admin center, I should say. And then we'll talk specifically about how to leverage co-management. Okay, so what is Configuration Manager? So for some of you, this might be painfully obvious. You've probably all heard of it, at least, if not used it. Configuration Manager has been around for a long time. SMS, or Systems Management Server, SMS 1.0, was released in 1994. You may know it better as SCCM, or System Center Configuration Manager was the new name for a long time. And then when Microsoft introduced Microsoft Endpoint Manager in 2019, the name was changed to Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager, although a lot of people, frankly, are still calling it SCCM. But the official name is Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager. So what is Configuration Manager? Configuration Manager is Microsoft's on-premises systems management solution. You can manage Windows devices, that is Windows servers, Windows laptops, desktops. You can manage Mac OS devices as well. But it's all on your own infrastructure. You put it on your own servers. You have a site server that you install on premises, and you have a that might have one management point or multiple management points. You might have multiple sites, more than just one primary site. Manage them with a central administration site. It's scalable to any size organization, but it's all built on-prem, and you put in your own distribution points that are scattered throughout your environment that are used for distributing the content. And the point being that you want to get the distribution points as close as possible to the devices where the configuration manager client is installed. So you're not pushing content over the WAN, you're pushing them over the local network. This solution is mainly geared towards managing domain joined Windows devices. I mean, that's by far the most common scenario, either Windows servers or Windows desktops and laptops, or both. It's mainly geared towards domain joined Windows devices. So some of the things you do when you're installing your infrastructure is you've got to install these different roles that support the features that are listed here under the management capabilities section. So, for example, doing imaging and OS deployment is something that just about everybody does who has Configuration Manager. You can create these task sequences that let you get very granular with how you install your corporate image. You can create a base reference image with Config Manager, and then you can layer applications and driver packages and configurations and everything on top in the task sequence, and you can use that as an OS deployment method. So you can, you can even, push it out as a required deployment to machines, and you can refresh their machines and move them from Windows 7 to Windows 10, or from a previous version of Windows 10 to a newer version of Windows 10, or you can install, bare metal. You can build a machine. So you can do OS deployment and imaging. You can distribute software. You create your own application packages and in Configuration Manager and deploy them out, and the content all goes again through your distribution points. You can do your monthly security patching. That's Microsoft security patching, not third-party security patching, but for any of the Microsoft operating system and Office and any other Microsoft products, the patching can go through your Config Manager, and you can also do your feature updates through Configuration Manager. So getting to a newer version of Windows 10 from the last version. You can also do remote control of devices through CM, and you can collect hardware and software inventory information, and you can push out configuration baselines to determine if, I don't know what some of the common ones are. A lot of them are geared towards, looking for vulnerabilities, or, to see if there's, SMB 1.0 is still being used in your environment, or just different configuration baselines like that are some common ones. And it can probably, and CM honestly can do probably a lot more things, but these are the main features of Configuration Manager. Now, Intune, by comparison, Intune was released in 2011, and it's the cloud-based service. So it's essentially like taking SCCM and saying, you don't have to install the infrastructure. You can use Microsoft's cloud, and they'll provide the physical infrastructure to run it. And all you're doing is using it as Microsoft Intune as a cloud service for managing your devices. Now, Intune has a different approach to how it pushes down policies. It uses mobile device management, or MDM, is how it pushes down policy. There used to be a client that you had to install, but the recommended way of managing Windows 10 is not through the client. I don't even know if the client is available anymore, but for the most part, the recommendation is to manage even Windows 10 devices and iOS, Android, Mac OS devices. These are the 4 platforms that are all supported by Intune. You would manage them through MDM policies that you push down. And Intune also offers something called Mobile Application Management, or MEM. You can deploy these app protection policies down to devices, and it's specifically good for scenarios like BYOD scenarios, where it's their own personal device, and maybe you don't want to take a heavy hand with how you manage that device. But you do want to manage the corporate applications and application data that is on those devices, then you could use a BYOD approach. Now, for BYOD scenarios, it's much more common when you're dealing with phones and iPads than it is with Windows and Mac OS devices, but it is possible with Windows and Mac OS devices as well. And Intune provides all the same types of capabilities as Configuration Manager, albeit they come in sort of a different format. And as an example, I'll bring up OS imaging again. So I mentioned that Configuration Manager uses task sequences, and it's all very granular, and you set it all up yourself. You manage all the content yourself. With Intune, it uses Windows Autopilot. And I'm going to talk more about Windows Autopilot well, I'll talk about it now, just to compare the differences. So Windows Autopilot is Microsoft's new approach to imaging, basically. It's taking the idea that currently what a lot of organizations do is they will order, you can do existing devices, but I'll use the scenario of a new device, right? If you order new devices through Dell or HP or Lenovo or whoever, then normally what happens is you order them, they get shipped to your IT department where they immediately get re-imaged with your corporate image using a tool that maybe you like Configuration Manager or maybe some other tool like BigFix or other tools that are out there that have similar capabilities. Or maybe you use Microsoft's MDT, Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. That's a free tool that you can use for creating OS images and deploying them in your environment. That's usually what people do. But the point of Windows Autopilot is that machine is coming with a perfectly good operating system already installed on it. So why don't we just take that OS? So we tend to intermingle the term imaging with Windows Autopilot regardless, but it's not really truly imaging. It's really more like reconfiguring what the operating system that is coming on it, the OEM OS, that image that is coming on the device. So usually they'll ship out Windows 10 Pro. So for example, when you set up Windows Autopilot, what you do is you register the physical device, whether maybe it's a laptop, you register that device, and it puts the hardware device information in Intune, and then you create a deployment profile in Intune that says, okay, when you turn on this device, then I want you to do, apply these settings. I want you to join it to the on-prem AD, in a hybrid Azure AD format so that it's also in your Azure AD. And I want you to push down a certain set of applications and a certain set of drivers. And the drivers are usually already installed, but a certain set of configurations that need to be pushed down to the device so that it's ready for the user to use to go ahead and start working. And that would include, changing the addition from Windows 10 Pro to Windows 10 Enterprise to unlock all the enterprise features. Because it's actually the same source files that are installed on there. They just need to be unlocked. So you get those enterprise level features. So the point is, you can skip the IT department. You could just ship it directly to the end user, which is really handy in a COVID-19 pandemic type world, or where a lot of people went remote that maybe weren't used to working remote before. Maybe it was easier just to go into the IT department and have them, image device and give it to you, and that user is off and running. In this case, it's easier just to ship it directly to the user, and they set up the machine. And after maybe 2 or 3 hours, when it's done pushing down apps, or maybe it'll only take less, maybe it'll be an hour. It depends on how many configuration settings and applications you push down, mostly. Then they're off and running. Now, there's also in that scenario a white glove approach. I think they call it pre-provisioning now, where you could still send it to the IT department and you could have them set it all up first, and install the apps and configuration settings, and then shrink wrap the device back to the ready state, the end user, and then they're ready to be off and running in minutes instead of hours. So anyway. So that's Intune. The point is that it's it provides the same sort of capabilities, but from a cloud world. And one of the great things about Intune and why it's so important for this conversation is that it does not care if those devices are on your internal network or if they're out on the public internet somewhere. As long as they're connected to the internet somewhere, then Intune can see them and can push applications and policies down to that device. Can push, if it's not enrolled yet in Intune, maybe the first step would be you're setting up autopilot, it's just a new machine. And if it's not that, then you'd have to enroll the device in Intune. But then from that point on, it's able to see it no matter where it is. I did want to show you briefly what Intune looks like. So this is the portal. Intune has, like I said earlier, it's been collected under the umbrella of the Microsoft Endpoint Manager Admin Center. So this is where you go to get to Intune at endpoint.microsoft.com, or if you're a government customer, I believe just endpoint.microsoft.us. And this is where your portal is going to be for managing Intune. They provide a dashboard area where you can see details about your device enrollment and device compliance policies, device configuration policies. This is all configurable, so you can set up this dashboard however you like, and you can cater it to different types of roles in your organization. Maybe someone is only interested in pushing out and managing applications, and they don't care about some of these other things. And so you can create custom dashboards for that purpose. And then some of the main areas that the main nodes over here on the left are devices, where you can drill down to see all the devices that you have. Again, these are the four major platforms are Windows, iOS, Android, and Mac OS for management. So you can see them by platform here. You can see, look at how you're enrolling devices. There's a number of different ways you can enroll devices in Intune, and they can be enrolled as either corporate devices or personal devices. And depending on how you enroll them allows different capabilities and different levels of management on those devices. Typically, if you enroll it as a corporate device, it gives you a full array of management options on that device, and you have full control over it. But in BYOD or personal devices, maybe it's a lighter approach I talked about earlier. So you can push out compliance policies. For example, you might require that devices be at a certain minimum OS level to be compliant, or you might require that iOS devices not be jailbroken to be compliant. You can create your own compliance policies and push those out. You can tie them in with conditional access. Conditional access policy is really a feature of Azure AD that basically says for these particular users, they can only get access to certain cloud applications if they meet certain conditions, is the point. And so if I tie that together with Intune compliance, then I could basically say, well, that device needs to be compliant in order to access those cloud applications. And it could be Exchange Online to get their email, or it could be SharePoint Online, or whatever, any of the possible cloud apps that are out there. Configuration profiles, there's a whole litany of things you can do in here. When you come in and you choose one of these platforms, you can then go and select what the profile type is that you want to push out. You can do device restrictions, manage device features, send out email profiles or VPN or Wi-Fi profiles that might have accompanying certificates that are required for authentication. So that the choices are all different depending on which operating system you choose. But there's tons and tons of different configurations that you can do in there, and you can also do custom. You choose to do one of these custom options here that allows you to do even more. So that maybe Intune doesn't have a nice little on-off button for the feature yet, but you can still manage a particular feature that it does not have like a particular button for it yet. Anyway, so there's a lot of things you can do in here. The apps area, this is where I was talking about, like if you only wanted to do MEM management, then you could publish your apps in here. This is where you would find a list of all the application packages that you have created in Intune. In a lot of these cases, you're not actually collecting or managing any content. You're merely stating where the source, the apps are going to come from. So like if I go to create an app, I can pull them from the store here, or they can also be synchronized into this list. If they're a volume purchase product app or VPP app, I can synchronize those apps into this list as well and deploy those out. Or you can deploy, for example, Microsoft 365 apps, which is the new name for Office Pro Plus. Well, I say new, it's been around for quite a while, but I think it takes a while for people to get used to it. But the Microsoft 365 apps for enterprise, this has an easy way to quickly set up a package to push out Microsoft 365 apps to your devices. And it pulls it all from Microsoft's Content Delivery Network, or CDN. In other words, it comes from Microsoft's data centers and gets pushed down through the web. You're not managing any of the content yourself, just like you're not managing it when you deploy an app that's a store app type. It's just going to pull it from the store. So anyway, there's lots of different app types that supports. At this point, you can deploy any type of application through Intune that you could through Configuration Manager. This section here, app protection policies, that's the main heart of mobile application management. This is where you can create policies that are typically the main reason why people create an app protection policy is usually for data loss prevention, or data loss protection, I should say. And you would come in here and say you would choose your applications that you want to define as managed applications. And then for DLP purposes, you could say, well, if it's a managed app, then it can only share data with other managed applications. I don't want people to be able to send data from, one of their managed applications like Outlook to Dropbox or something like that. And you can restrict the cut, copy, and paste functions between managed apps and non-managed apps. So you could say, okay, I don't want people to be able to copy lines of text out of an email that's a corporate email and paste it into a personal email mailbox, and things like that. So that's the sort of policies you can push down without even having to enroll the device. If you want to do MDM type policies, like all the device configuration that I was showing earlier, then the device has to be enrolled, either as personal or as a corporate device. But you don't have to enroll a device if you want to use MEM. You can do it MEM without enrollment, or you could layer it on top of the MDM policies as well. And then the other main option I wanted to point out in here is if you create one of these app protection policies, you could assign a PIN specifically for managed applications. So I could assign a PIN to Outlook, for example, and say, okay, I'm not, maybe I'm not concerned about your device password, but I want to at least make sure that there's a PIN required to get into the app. Or maybe you want to do both, require a device password on the device, and they've got to get a PIN for the app. I've had organizations bring up the concern before, what if I give the phone to my child to use some other application on the device, but I don't want them getting into my Outlook? Well, you could have that as an extra layer of protection there. So, and then I'll bring up endpoint security, and I think and these are I'll stop there because these are the main things. I want to get out other things, but endpoint security is becoming the sort of collection area of all kinds of different security technologies from Microsoft. You can deploy Microsoft like Windows 10 security baselines, other types of security baselines through this node here. You can manage your antivirus policies. This node here, like the Defender antivirus, built in. Disk encryption, you can manage your BitLocker through here, or from Mac OS File Vault, manage your firewall policies. Endpoint detection and response. When you create this package, got a couple of configuration settings, but mainly when you push that package out, what you're doing is onboarding that device to Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, which was previously known as Microsoft Defender ATP, or Advanced Threat Protection. So it provides an advanced layer of protection for advanced behavioral type attacks that may not be caught by antivirus. I mean, antivirus does do behavioral modeling through its cloud-based protection. So you through Defender antivirus, but what endpoint detection response gives you is it's an EDR basically. If you may have heard of other EDR products, and it will detect in addition things that conform to like MITRE ATT&CK, the MITRE ATT&CK model, where there's different behaviors, attack behaviors that are just recognized as being a pattern that form an overall attack. And so it can detect those kind of complex advanced threats. And you can apply attack surface reduction technologies to your Windows 10 device here, and account protection, device compliance. That's just another link into the compliance. But anyway, this is where you can do a lot of your security. So that's the tour for Intune. I just wanted you to get a feel for what that looks like with the cloud-based management. All right, get back over here. Okay, so let's talk about how it all comes together for Microsoft Endpoint Manager. So Microsoft Endpoint Manager was released a couple of years ago in 2019, and essentially it was sort of a rebranding, but also new capabilities, new features, and a whole new Microsoft Endpoint Manager Admin Center that we were just in, that collects all of these different tools to be able to be managed through a single interface. So it combines Configuration Manager and Intune and Windows Autopilot that I already talked about, all into a single admin console. It also combines something called Desktop Analytics, which is another feature in there that I don't know that a lot of people know about. But Desktop Analytics is a tool that helps you to detect possible incompatibilities, app incompatibilities, driver incompatibilities that might occur in your environment when you go to, say, the next version of Windows 10. It was especially useful when going from Windows 7 to Windows 10. It's going to be useful when you go to Windows 11 as well. But it helps even as you go from one feature update to another, going from maybe Windows 10 20H1 to Windows 10 20H2, for example, or when they're semi-annual releases now for the feature updates. And so the Desktop Analytics basically collects information about your environment and knows what kind of apps you're running and drivers you're running, and it can give you information that's been collected all from the community and from Microsoft to understand better where those incompatibilities might lie. So great tool. And then finally, one of the capabilities that was collected into Microsoft Endpoint Manager is CoManagement. So that's one of the main things that I want to talk about, is that capability there. CoManagement is basically tying together Config Manager and Intune. Basically, CoManagement allows you to do two main things. Number one is Tenant Attach. So what Tenant Attach is, it's basically saying, just to kind of point out what's going on in this slide. This represents your on-premises infrastructure. You've got your Configuration Manager infrastructure, and you using a Config Manager console to get into that, and you've got all your managed devices down here. So down here we've got our regular domain joined PCs, and they've only got a Configuration Manager client. In the middle, this area represents machines that are co-managed, that have both are Intune enrolled and have a Config Manager client. And then over here on the right, we've got devices that are enrolled in Intune but don't have a Configuration Manager client. So you've got a range here of different devices. And so what we do with Tenant Attach is we say, I want to attach my Configuration Manager infrastructure up to my tenant and make it manageable through Endpoint Manager. And the great thing about this is that, and Intune, as I showed you, the Intune console is already up there as it is. All the Intune functionality is already built into Microsoft Endpoint Manager. But when you attach the tenant, the config manager to your tenant over here, basically it not only gives you visibility as to what's going on these devices over here that only have config manager clients into a single pane of glass, but it allows you to manage those devices as well. So I could, from Endpoint Manager, I could say, I want to push down an application to a device that only has a config manager client, and it would basically deliver the message to the config manager infrastructure and say, and config manager would then push the app down to that device. And obviously you could push apps down through the Intune console as well over here. Now, the second thing that co-management allows you to do is co-manage the workloads. And by workloads, I mean like different areas of management, like compliance or application deployment, right? So I could use, I could manage some workloads on these devices down here that are co-managed. So going from an infrastructure level down more to the client level, these clients, I could choose to manage application deployment through config manager, but I want to choose Intune to manage compliance, or I could use Intune to manage security updates, and not the other workloads. And what you do is you use these sliders here. When you configure co-management, you can use these workload sliders. These are the different workloads. There's 7 different workloads that you can manage right now, and decide if you want to manage them with Configuration Manager or with Intune. And so if I move the sliders in this window, this is accessible through the Config Manager console. If I move them to the left, then I'm saying, okay, Config Manager is going to handle this particular workload. If I move them to the right, Intune is going to manage it. And that's for all devices. Now, if you want to manage, if you want to split it up, and there be some devices that you're piloting Intune management on, then you could create a pilot group, and that's created over in this staging area tab here. But you could define pilot groups that are different for all of these different workloads, and you could say, okay, anything that I put in that collection is an Intune pilot device, and I want to manage this workload for those devices in Intune, but anything else I'm going to manage through Configuration Manager. So it's a great way to, that's one of the, in my mind, like one of the main benefit of co-management is that it sort of eases your way into cloud management. If you want to use some of the workloads, manage some of the workloads in the cloud, then you can gradually kind of move them over. You don't have to move everything over en masse. You could just have this pilot group and gradually move devices into that pilot group. And then when you feel comfortable, just move it all the way over to the right. Say, okay, I'm just going to manage this completely with Intune. So if you've got a goal to maybe lighten your infrastructure presence, all the physical machines, that servers and so forth that you're managing on-prem, and get more to a cloud-based approach, then it provides a nice way to get there.
Shane, any guidance on moving from config man to Intune as far as the workloads are concerned? I mean, is it, should customers do it one at a time, or are there a couple that they might want to do together?
Well, as you can see with these two, endpoint protection and the resource access policies, those are under this full this slider on device configuration. So if you do that, then they're all going to be whatever you set device configuration for. But in general, I would say the first thing that customers usually do is start using Windows Update policies. It's probably the first thing, and the compliance policies. That I won't say that's what you should do. I don't think it matters. I think it's whatever you have a goal to do. Depends on it, but it's usually guided by the pain points. And one of the big pain points of having remote users has been patching. it seems like that's just what, that comes up a lot when we're talking to customers, is that we want to patch these devices. They have Configuration Manager clients, but Configuration Manager can't see them unless they're connected through VPN. And we don't require that they be connected through VPN to get their email. So a lot of users don't connect to VPN for long periods of time, and so they get behind on their patches. That's been the main concern. Now, there's different ways to get around that. For some organizations have installed a cloud management gateway, or CMG, for their config manager infrastructure. And that would allow you to reach those devices over the public internet. Or, and what's been around for a much longer time, is internet-based client management, which allows you to basically, by using a PKI environment and certificates and HTTPS lockdown communications over the internet, you can basically say, I'm going to require HTTPS communications from this client to this client, and we need to use certificates to authenticate that they are who this device is, who it really says it is, and we could manage it over the internet. But it takes but that's kind of a heavy lift to put in internet-based client management. So easier mode would be CMG, and then finally, another option that a lot of customers go into is, like I spoke about here, is Intune, because Intune can just inherently see devices out on the internet. So did that answer your question? Hopefully.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Shane.
Okay. All right. Anyway, yeah, and so and the great thing about CoManagement is that it's very easy to enable. There's two paths to get there. I mean, I talked about this slide here. I mean, you might be in a situation where you've got some devices that are only enrolled in Intune, or you've got some devices that only have a Configuration Manager client. And so if they only have a Configuration Manager client, then you need to enroll them in Intune. If they're only enrolled in Intune, then you need to install a Configuration Manager client. So it's either one or the other for that. Now, the good thing is that you can use Intune to push out the CM client, or you could use the Configuration Manager to enroll a device into Intune. And so when we work with customers, most of the time when we're trying to enroll a device into Intune that is currently being managed with Config Manager, either we do it through Configuration Manager or we do it through group policy, are the most common methods. And it does have some prereqs for doing that. Intune enrollment requires that the device be hybrid Azure AD joined, so it cannot be only joined to your on-prem AD. And what that means is, and a lot of you may have already started this process for your user accounts, but you need to install Azure AD Connect in your environment and synchronize computer accounts up to your Azure AD tenant. Most of the time when people put in Azure AD Connect, they're only synchronizing their user accounts first so that they can get to single sign-on for Office 365 applications. But for Intune enrollment, you have to expand that out and actually synchronize the computer accounts as well up to your Azure AD tenant. Anyway, but when they either hybrid, so Intune requires that they be either hybrid Azure AD joined, or I can say they can be natively Azure AD joined. But the thing is, with when they're natively Azure AD joined, then it means that you're not seeing them in your on-prem AD. It means that Configuration Manager won't discover them through regular Active Directory discovery to be able to see them and manage them. Doesn't mean that you can't still put a CM client on there, but it's just a little harder to get them managed under Configuration Manager if they're not joined to the on-prem AD. Most people are, when they're through CM, are managing their domain joined on-prem devices. And then with the device enrollment in Intune, you just need to find a way to install a CM client on the device in that case. If they're in on-prem AD, you can do what's called the client push deployment to get that CM client down there is one way, or you could push down the package through Intune. And then finally, like that, so that's how you would you would get them both managed, in both tools, in both Intune and Configuration Manager. Now, to link them together and actually enable the co-management, you have to go into Configuration Manager and you have to launch this wizard, but it's pretty simple. You, in the Configuration Manager console, you launch this wizard and it allows you to do the tenant attach on this tenant onboarding tab. And then you set up this enablement. If you want to enable co-management right here at a client level, then you can create a group and you can say anybody in this collection, I want to enroll that device in Intune. So that's a way you can do that. You can add devices. At first you can start with just test devices, then do a pilot, and then just sort of gradually move devices into that. Or you could, like I said before, you could use group policy to do that. And then I already showed you the workloads tab, and the staging is just defining the pilot groups for the workloads. So it's pretty simple and easy to do. So once you have that set up, what are the benefits of co-management? Well, like the main benefit that we're talking about here about trying to manage a distributed workforce, the point is that we'll be able to manage those users even when they're remote, and we'll be able to do it in a secure way, right? We'll be able to determine, with conditional access policies, what location they're coming from, whether they're compliant or not. You could use risk levels that are based on identity management. What risk levels the device are. You can use risk levels that come from Microsoft Defender for Endpoint to determine if a machine is at a certain risk level, if it has certain number of vulnerabilities on the machine. So it allows you to manage those remote users in a secure way, and anything that's connected to the internet, Intune can manage. Second point, continue to use your existing group policies. So one of the benefits of being hybrid Azure AD joined is that those computer accounts are still in your on-prem AD. You can still use group policies to manage those devices. You don't have to just move everything over to MDM policy management or templates. You can do that. Now Intune has come a long way in being able to emulate what kind of management you do. It's the same type of management you can do with group policies. There's another way to do it in Intune, and it has even capabilities to exactly mimic what is happening in group policy to be able to push down to machines. But it pushes it out as an MDM policy and manages it at a local group policy level. And the point of that being, I probably should have said this up front, Azure AD does not have true group policy management. So if you join the computer natively to Azure AD, you're not going to have those group policies anymore. And to rely on, you're going to have to find other ways to manage it. That's why that's just one more reason why the gradual approach of moving workloads through co-management over into the cloud is so helpful, because then you can figure out what you need to do at like a pilot level, or to replace all those group policies, and it gives you time to do it over, and you don't feel rushed. I have worked with some customers who have moved like a group of devices just all at once. They just took them straight out of on-prem AD and natively joined them Azure AD and say, okay, now I want to manage them there. And they had all kinds of group policies in place to manage those devices. And so we had to figure out in a very short period of time how to emulate, how to get the same result from an Intune perspective and set that all up and make sure that everything was in place. It's just much easier if you can just do it gradually. I already talked about Windows Autopilot, but a benefit here of it being co-managed is that you could use either the task sequences that you've been using or traditional imaging through Config Manager, or you could go to the more modern approach with Windows Autopilot. Next point, adding iOS and Android management. So that's only available through Intune. You can't manage iOS and Android through Configuration Manager. Continue to manage your servers in Configuration Manager. So Intune does not manage, it only does Windows 10. it does not manage Windows Server. So it's good to still be able to rely on Configuration Manager to manage those servers. Managing BYOD devices, the scenario. This is much more a scenario of Intune, being able to manage personal devices. The Configuration Manager is not geared towards that at all. And I talked a little bit about MEM policies and applying the data loss prevention policies with MEM, and a lot. DLP is a hot topic right now, and some of these things that I've got starred here, you can see. I wanted to point out that they follow along with Microsoft's Zero Trust model. They're going to be important for that. I'm going to talk about that briefly here in just a minute. Leveraging conditional access. So again, I mean, conditional access works from a user account perspective, but when you introduce Intune, it also works from a device perspective, being able to determine if a device is compliant and base their access off of that. And finally, I talked about being able to manage through a single pane of glass through the Microsoft Endpoint Manager admin center. So what happened to my slide? Oh, I passed it. I'm sorry. Here it is. Okay, so with the Zero Trust model, if you haven't heard of this, there are going to be some upcoming webinars in this same series here that are going to be on this subject. This is an important initiative for Microsoft right now. It's an important initiative for Planet Technologies right now. We're doing a lot of we're preparing a lot of projects and templates and things around this whole strategy of Zero Trust. What Zero Trust is, if you haven't heard about this yet, is it's basically, instead of assuming everything behind your corporate firewall is safe, the Zero Trust model assumes every request is a potential breach. That being the case, every request has to be verified as though it originates from an open network. Regardless of where the request originates or what resource it accesses, Zero Trust teaches us never trust, always verify. So every access request is fully authenticated and authorized and encrypted before granting that access. The easiest way, I think, to think about Zero Trust is that we're assuming that everything is on the open internet. It's not in some safe, walled-off area of your network. We're just assuming everything is open on the internet, and everything is a potential breach that has to be constantly protected. It's moving from a world of implicit assumptions that are made based on single elements to more of this model where we're doing explicit verification of all elements of access. So one of these components is the devices area. The Zero Trust model is made up of all these different components: identities, data, apps, infrastructure, network, and devices. And it's all managed by this single engine, this policy engine in the middle. This is conditional access, is what they're talking about here, is the policy in the middle that manages them. So what I'm talking about ties in is the fact that these is a couple of things. BYOD, we're not just concerned about only corporate devices and securing those. We want to make sure that we're providing secure access from anything from unmanaged devices as well. And we want to make sure that, as it says here, we're able to check the compliance state and use that with our conditional access policies. So that's how it all kind of ties together, and that's why I wanted to star these items here and just show where it ties into this Zero Trust model. And along the lines of security, I just wanted to also point out that compliance is another, especially with our government customers, obviously, but with anyone right now is usually interested in compliance from some angle, from some perspective. You are typically interested in compliance. I mean, we're doing a lot of talking right now about, obviously NIST 800-171 has been around for a while, but CMMC level 3 and ITAR and CGIS comes up a lot. Obviously, FedRAMP for our federal customers. Intune currently supports over 50 of these compliance offerings, and so it's a great way to help you to get into compliance in these different models that are presented here, compliance standards, I should say. Okay, so with that, I've come to the end, and I have not been watching the to see if anybody put any questions in there, but it is now open to you for if you want to ask any questions. Tony, did we get any in the chat?
No, we did not get any in the chat window yet. So to your point, Shane, if there are any questions, either feel free to type them in through the chat window or take yourself off mute and fire away. So I'll start off. So Shane, how long does it typically take to set up co-management in an environment?
How long does it take? Well, in one way, minutes, and another way, months. Like just doing the configuration that I was talking about. Flipping the switch for it takes like 5 clicks or something. I think that was originally when it came out. That was the thing that Brad Anderson was talking about the most. That you can install co-management in 3 clicks or something. It was only like a few clicks, but behind that, I mean, you also have to obviously enroll the devices. So it takes some time to enroll the devices. Enrollment, though, is not that hard. I mean, once it's Intune enrollment is invisible to the user. It's not going to reboot the machine or anything like that. So it's a lighter type change. So you can really start enroll devices as fast as you feel comfortable doing so, and flipping on those switches in Configuration Manager console is pretty easy. Now, what takes the longer time is, like I said, I would really highly recommend being very gradual about moving these workload management sliders from Configuration Manager over into Intune. So the actual co-management of the workloads, I think should be done gradually, so that you can make sure that that everybody is, all the devices are taken care of, and you're still completing all the things that you're able to do today in Config Manager, or whatever your current tools are going to be handled through Intune. Now, if you're not using Config Manager, if you're using BigFix or some other capability like that, then you could use the same approach, but I've heard of some, being able to install, two different client. You could enroll a device in Intune, and you could have like another device on there. I'm using BigFix. I'm just pulling that out of the air. There's other tools that we work with, but that customers sometimes have besides Config Manager. The thing is, the only problem is that they don't know about each other, right? So you have to be really careful that Intune is not stepping on your on-prem tool, and for that the on-prem tool isn't stepping on Intune and trying to manage the same things, because in that case it's going to be unpredictable who's going to win. So the good thing about Configuration Manager and co-management is that it allows you to just gradually move over, and they are aware of each other and won't step on one another with the workloads. So yeah, so in that sense, you might you go as quickly as you feel comfortable, but the recommendation is to pilot it first, and then start move everything over gradually. Then when you feel comfortable, put the slider all the way over to Intune. That's about it. So.
Great. Any other questions? As I said, feel free to take yourself off mute or type them in the window. I'm not sure if Jim or Steve from Planet, if either of you have anything that you'd would like to say in closing. Okay, well, I guess that's it, Shane. We not many questions coming from the audience. So thank you, everyone, for attending today, and thanks you, Shane, for presenting. We really appreciate it. It was very informative.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Take care.
All right, take care. Thank you.